Hi, welcome to CallFire's IVR webinar. Today we're going to look at creating a simple outbound interactive voice response, or IVR, telephone call. In reality, in CallFire's system, we're not using voice responses so much as we're using touch tone responses, but the principle is the same. And what we're going to do is a simple outbound survey, where we're going to look at a couple of different kinds of survey questions and getting back responses and saving those responses. We're also going to look at a couple of tags or actions that have nothing to do with our survey specifically, but we're going to look at how to create a simple voicemail system and how to transfer a call somewhere else, all of which are useful. This is by no means meant to be an exhaustive webinar on everything the IVR can possibly do, everything our XML can possibly do. Now, to get started, we assume you have an account, and what you're going to do is log into your account and go up to Create, and there are a couple of places in which you can create an IVR. We have inbound IVR, and that's where they would call into you. You would have to get a phone number from us to do that, so we're not going to do that now. We're going to do an outbound. That's the IVR broadcast, and we would just click on this in order to get started, and we'll notice that this brings us to something that says IVR broadcast, IVR XML, and this is called our IVR Designer. The IVR Designer is a drag and drop environment, and the things you drag are these what look like buttons. These buttons are the actions that the IVR can take. They're what we call tags, and you just drag them into place down into the work area. This is the work area, this big white area, and that's how you build your IVR. It uses an outline format. In other words, a tag that is indented from another tag is really dependent upon that tag. There's something in programming called parent-child relationships and dependency relationships, and our XML language utilizes that. And we'll see that as we go along. Excuse me. Now we have a set of 8 actions or tags under the basic set, and we have another 8 under the advanced. This is sort of an arbitrary distinction. There's nothing particularly more advanced in many cases in all of these tags, and we'll be using some from both sets. Now, the IVR is a phone call. It's an automated phone call, scripted and automated, but it is a phone call. And as such, it always begins with a greeting. And so we've set you up so that when you launch the IVR Designer, it automatically starts with a play tag. This is kind of a dummy play tag, but you don't have to get rid of it. You can just double-click it and configure it for your greeting. Pretty much all IVRs start with a single play tag as a greeting, because you always want to greet your customer in some way. If it's an inbound call, you want to greet them with hello. If it's an outbound call, after they say hello, you want to say who you are. So we're going to call this this is our greeting tag, and you'll notice that it's, when we double click on it, it brings up a setup new action box. Every tag has a setup new action box associated with it, and in that action box is where we define the attributes of the tag and where we even give some of the content of the tag. Now, the attributes are things about it that we can define that are sometimes optional, sometimes required. You'll notice this name section. Names are optional, but names are very strongly recommended in CallFire. We have a go-to tag, you'll notice here, and that's how anyone familiar with programming knows that you can use a go-to to move to various places in your programming. Well, in order for this to work, it needs to read the name of the tag, so you have to have a name to the tag. There are some rules about naming your tags. And these rules apply to both the names of tags and the names of variables within CallFire. These rules are, number 1, they must be unique. You can't have 2 that are the same. They can only consist of alpha and numeric characters, so alphabetic characters or numbers 0 through 9. They are case sensitive, so you can have capital letters and lowercase letters, and they're not the same thing. And they cannot have any other characters other than an underscore. No other characters beyond that. And that includes spaces. They cannot have any spaces. Okay? So there are a couple of ways to deal with having to get some compound information in when you can't use spaces. One is to use underscores for everything. The other is just to make something a compound word where you capitalize the first letter of every word. So you could do something like, if we were to use just underscores, play my greeting. And that would be the way to do it. Compound would be if we did play my greeting like that, and that's a single compound word in which we capitalize everything except for the first word, just to show where we are. Actually, in CallFire, we're going to recommend doing a combination. So we're going to do it like this. Oops. So what we're doing is we're going to use the name of the tag, what kind of tag it is, a play, a menu, a key press, a transfer. And then we're going to use an underscore, and then we're going to use a compound word to define what the action is that it's actually taking. In this case, it's playing my greeting. Okay? So that's the convention that we use at CallFire. We recommend you follow something similar. It's not quite so important that you use exactly the convention we do, but it is important that you have some kind of a convention so that programmers can come in behind you and get some sense of the logic of what you're doing. So that's the name here. Now, what does a play tag do? It plays a type of sound. That type of sound can actually be a sound wave or a sound file from some outside website. So we can have a fully qualified domain like http://www.mysite.com, and we can go out to mysite.com and grab myfile.wave, and we can play it. Okay? Or we can go out and get myfile.mp3. Those are the two allowed formats, WAV or GSM or MP3. Now, if we do go out to your website and grab a sound file, it must be in a very specific format. It must be 16-bit for the bit rate, 8 kilohertz for the sample rate, and mono, not stereo. Okay? Keep in mind this is a telephone delivery system. We don't want anything too specific or too high quality. The more we have to compress it, the lousier it'll sound. So contrary to what seems intuitive, the lower quality you record it, the better quality it'll be when we play it back. Okay? So that's how to go out to an outside site and get a sound file. You can also just record your sound files within CallFire, then they're always the right format. And you can get to them by clicking on Recorded Sound, and that gives you a drop-down menu with all of the sound files you've ever created in CallFire. So I can grab one of these, like features press6.mp3, and I can play that. And that's from within CallFire itself. The third thing we can do is we can use the text-to-speech engine. Okay? So we give you 3 English voices, 1 Spanish voice, and we give you 3 female voices, one of whom is a Spanish voice, and 1 male voice. There are some reasons for picking one over the other. Keep in mind your audience. Okay? If you want to get through it quickly, Mary is high-pitched and fairly fast-paced. Use her. Beth is more of an alto, a little slower paced, and Roger is a baritone and the slowest paced of all. Keep in mind that the older we get, we lose more of our the upper harmonics, the higher pitches of our hearing, and it's also harder to hear people who speak fast. So Roger would be a good choice for an older audience. Mary might be good for young, impatient audiences. Okay, that's up to you. And Maria will read digits and time formats and things like that in Spanish. Okay, and she also reads with a Spanish accent correctly. So we're going to pick Roger, and this is going to be our initial greeting. So all we're doing in the greeting is greeting our customer. So we're just going to say, hello, welcome to our survey. Oops, don't need a question mark. Just welcome to our survey. And that's it. We don't ask a question or anything else at the greeting level. To ask a question, we have to actually do something fairly special. Think about our first question. Our first question is going to be what we call a meta-level question. We're not going to ask an actual survey question yet. We're going to ask if they're willing to take our survey. In asking that, what we're going to ask is, will you take our survey? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. And so if we think about what we have to do here, we have to have a play tag that's going to ask the question and describe how to give us an answer. And we have to have some key presses that actually capture the values of the keys that they're pressing and their responses to us. And somehow the system needs to know that the next play tag, which asks the question, is going to work in conjunction with those key presses where they're capturing the responses. And the thing that does that is the press menu. The press menu's job is to act as a container for the play tag and the key presses and make them all work together as one unit. Okay? So actually, when we bring down the press menu, you'll see that it brings down one dependent play tag and one dependent key press, because you must have at least one of each under any press menu. So we're going to bring that down, and this is not really a dependent of the play tag, so we're not going to point our arrow at the play tag. We're going to point it all the way over to the left so it lines it up. But notice that it did bring down, as I mentioned, a dependent play tag and a dependent key press. We know they're dependent because they are indented and they have these lines coming down from it. So let's fill out the action box for the menu. And following our convention, we'll call this menu. And we're just going to call it top level, TL for top level. Max digits is 1. Max digits refers to the number of key presses they're going to press to give us an answer. Think about how that works. So we're asking, will you take our survey? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. Each of those answers, 1 for yes or 2 for no, is a single key press. So the max digit here is 1. To clarify that further, we could ask, please enter your 5-digit account number followed by the pound sign. The convention is the pound sign is always permanently programmed to end input and move on to the next node, so we always ask for the pound sign at the end of multiple key presses. But if we ask for that 5-digit key press followed by the pound sign, that's actually 6 key presses, right? So we would do max digits of 6. And the system would know that the pound sign isn't one of the ones we're counting, so when we look for the answer, it's going to only look for the 5. But you always do the 6 to include it. But we're going to do 1 because we're just doing press 1 for yes or 2 for no. Timeout is in milliseconds, so this is 3,500 milliseconds. That's 3.5 seconds to us. Okay, and 3.5 seconds is how long we're going to allow them to press 1 or 2. If they don't do anything in that time, we're either going to loop back and make them try again, or we're going to move on to some other programming or whatever it is we program the timeout to do. Okay, so we're going to say OK. Now we're going to define our play tag. So this is play top level. And we're going to use our text-to-speech, use Roger throughout. And we're going to ask our question, will you take our survey? And notice I use a question mark. Use proper punctuation. It will inflect up for a question. It'll emphasize an exclamation point. It'll properly pause for commas or periods. So will you take our survey? Press 1 for yes, pause, so I use a comma, or 2 for no. You'll probably use more commas for this than you would in your normal formal writing because you want pauses regularly to help them understand the text-to-speech. So will you take our survey? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. Now we're going to add 2 other possibilities here that have nothing to do with our survey, but I mentioned 2 other actions that we're going to do with our IVR that are useful. So we're going to say, or press 3 to leave a message. Or 4 to speak with an agent. Okay, so we'll come back and do those. We're not going to do these first, but we'll put placeholders in there for 3 to leave a message or 4 to speak with an agent. Now we need to define our key presses, and we're going to need 4 of them because we're getting 4 responses. So we'll just use an acronym KP instead of key press spelled out. And this is top level like everything else, but this is response 1, so TLR1. And the press value is the actual key they press, or keys. Can be more than one. So they're going to press 1 for yes here, so we're going to say OK. So what happens here is, by our rule of dependency, if we think about it, they press 1, and that means that they're going to take the survey, so we could build our whole survey as a dependent of that key press. And that could get very long and tedious before we ever get back to key press 2, which is no. And that's not really the best way to program, because you can't see everything at a single level. So instead, we're going to work in what we call a modular fashion. And we'll come back and do the actual survey. Right now, we'll just put in a tag that says go to the survey if I press 1. So we're going to use this go to and call it go to survey. But we don't have a node yet for the survey because we haven't built it yet. So we'll have to come back and do that node name later. Okay, so but now we can bring in key press 2, and just like the first key press, it's a dependent of the menu, so we point its arrow right at that menu icon, and that lines it up perfectly. And this is our KP TLR2, top level response 2. Its press value is 2, and it means no, I won't take your survey. Okay, so we could use another go-to, but really we just need a couple of quick tags, just a quick play tag saying, sorry, you won't take our survey. So we'll call this play TLR2. Use our text-to-speech. Use Roger. Sorry, you won't take our survey. Please try later. And we could say goodbye, I didn't bother. And then we can do a hang up, and we're done. They press 2, they won't take our survey, so we're pretty much done with them after saying sorry. Okay? Now, the only other thing we might, actually we have 2 other key presses. Remember, we have our 3 to leave a message or 4 to speak with an agent. So we'll come back and fill those out, but we're going to put the key presses in place first. So again, the key press is a dependent of the menu, so we line it up properly. We'll give it a name. KP top level response 3. Its press value is 3. Say OK. And do the last key press. Top level response 4. Press value is 4. And that will be for our transfer tag. Okay, as I said, we'll come back to this. We're going to go on to the survey itself. Now, actually, this is our top level, and we would normally do one more key press. That would be an invalid handler. So if we look at this, we've defined key presses 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we've talked about how the pound sign is always predefined to an input. But that leaves a bunch of undefined key presses, right? Specifically 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and star. So normally we would put an invalid handler in here to capture those and say, hey, you messed up, go back and do it again, and we'd loop them back. I'm going to show you how to do that in the survey itself, so I'm not going to bother here. But this is just to remind you that normally you would do that at this level before moving on. So we're going to start our survey, and our survey starts with a question. So that means another press menu, and we're going to bring it down here all by itself because it's not a dependent upon of anything yet. So we're going to call this menu, and we could call this menu survey 1, menu survey question 1, all of that. Just to be brief, we're going to call it menu Q1. And Q1 stands for question 1, of course. Max digits of 1 is fine for this question, and timeout of 3500 is fine. So, play question 1. Use our text-to-speech, use Roger again. And our question 1, we're a simple company with simple questions. Just, do you like us? Press 1 for yes, or 2 for no. That's it. Do you like us? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. Now we can define our first key press, which will be KP Question 1, response 1. Notice I follow the same format I've used before in names here. Press value is 1, and that's for yes, they like us. So now, actually we can do one other thing here before I move on. And remember we have this undefined goto. Well, now our survey definitely starts with menu Q1, so we can define the goto as going to menu Q1. So we can go down here. You notice all these names we've been creating are in this list here. That's why we give things names, and they must be independent and must be unique. So menu Q1 starts our survey. Always the menu level, not the play level. The menu is going to drop right down to the play level and play it, but remember the menu has certain things it has to be invoked, like the max digits and the timeout and things like that. So menu Q1, and there we are. So now let's talk about what's happening down here. We've asked, do you like us? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. And we've defined a key press to give us back the yes answer. So we need to capture that somehow. We need to save it. It depends upon what you're doing with your survey data. But we either need to put it in a variable so you can deal with it elsewhere, maybe send it to you in a get tag, or we need to just stash it in the report so you can tally it. And under advanced, we have two ways to do that. The setVar creates a variable. setVar stands for set variable, or create variable. It's a short way of saying it. And we can create a variable here that can actually be used by other programming, by C++, by C#, by .NET, by Java, by PHP, by Python. Any of those can use this variable name if we send it to them properly. Okay? And that's because we're following the rules of variable names. Remember, they're the same as tag names. So they must be unique. They can't have spaces. They can't have odd characters. They're only alphanumeric characters or underscores, period. Okay? So the setVar will create a variable and will put in it whatever we tell it to put in it. Okay? The stash does something similar. It also takes a variable name, and that variable name follows the same rules. But what it does is it places that variable name as a header in the report and sticks the content, the value that we want in it, in the report, so we can tally it up in the report. We may not need to do both of these. Usually you do one or the other. Okay? You don't need to do a setVar and a stash. Once in a great while you might want to if you're both sending something to another server and if you want to stash its value in the report so you can see it later. Okay? We're going to do both here at this question level just for convenience and for teaching. Okay? So I'm going to bring down the setVar, and I'm going to make this a dependent of this key press because this particular variable is being created because we pressed 1 for yes, I do like you. So that makes it a dependent of the key press. And we're going to go to its action box, give it the name, and for short we'll just call this set. And this is question 1, response 1, right? Response 1 being the yes response, just like key press Q1R1. Now the variable name, this is interesting here. The variable name is Q1R, question 1 response, not question 1 response 1. The reason is the specific value 1 or 2 is going to go in the value. That's where we put in what they pressed. The variable name is asking the question, what is your response? And that same question is true of whichever answer they give us, okay, because that different answers go in the value. The variable name is at the question level. So there's only going to be one variable created for this whole question, Q1R. The value, well, the value can be whatever they pressed. That's going to be 1 in this case. It can be the meaning of what they pressed. We could spell out yes, and it'll take that. It'll take anything you put in here, okay? I recommend putting both the number value and the actual value, so 1-yes. And the reason I do this is you can use the left function in Excel to tally up all the numbers, the numerical values, and work with them that way. And you can use the actual translated meaning to see in the pie charts within CallFire itself. And so it makes it easier. So we're going to do 1-yes, and that's our setVar for that key press. Now we need a key press for the no answer. So we're going to bring down another key press, make it a dependent of menu Q1, and it's down here if I scroll. And we'll give it its name, KP Q1 response 2. This is a 2-value response, meaning they press 2. And now we need to do a set var for it. So set Q1 response 2. Variable name, again, it's just Q1R. But this time the value is 2-no. So let's think about what we did here. What we've done is we've asked the question, do you like us? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. We've set up a variable, Q1R, which captures whether they press 1, then it gives us the value 1-yes, or whether they press 2, in which case it gives us the value 2-no. But there's only one variable, okay, that holds either of those two values. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing is we might want to stash it in the report. Now keep in mind we didn't have to do these set vars. And if we don't need to reference this later in the IVR, or we don't need to send it directly to your servers through a get tag or something like that, then doing a stash is infinitely easier, and you could replace each of these set vars with an individual stash. But since we created a variable, we have a single place where either of the values are stored, so we can use a single stash to stick it in the report. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to make the stash at the menu level. We're going to call this stash question1 response. In its variable name, we can't have the same variable name because it will overwrite, and we don't want to overwrite our own variable. So remember that the variable name of a stash is really a heading in the report. So we can use our friendly question as actually the variable name. Now it must be a single run-on word with no spaces and stuff. So we'll do it like this. We'll ask the question, do you like us? And we can't use the question mark because that's an illegal character. Remember, the only character besides alphanumeric is the underscore. So do you like us? And the value, well, the value is whatever the value of Q1R is. It might be 1-yes, it might be 2-no. But we can ask the system, what's the value of Q1R? The way we do that is a reference, $, curly brace, or piano bracket, which is the funny looking brace to the right of P holding down Shift. So $, curly brace, the variable name, which is Q1R. This is saying go find that Q1R and put its value in here, and then close curly brace. And that's how we reference or ask a variable for its content. So we say OK. And now our stash says go out and find Q1R and populate that in the report under the heading, do you like us? Okay. Now the only other thing we need to do here is do an invalid handler, because we've defined key presses 1 and 2. We still have invalid key presses 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and star. So we're going to bring down one more key press, make it a dependent of the menu. We're going to call this key press question1 invalid. And we can leave the value here, the press value, as default. Default is predefined by the system to pick up any key presses that aren't otherwise defined at that menu level. So at this particular menu level, we've defined key press 1, we've defined key press 2, and pound is always defined, as we know. So this will pick up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and star. So we'll say OK. Then we'll just tell them that they messed up. So we'll put our little play tag down here. Call this play question1 invalid. Use our text-to-speech, good old Roger, and we'll say that is an invalid entry. Now, actually, if I spelled it this way, it would say that is an invalid entry. So we're going to misspell invalid as 2 words, and then it'll read that is an invalid entry. We're going to say OK. And then we're just going to use our go-to, our handy go-to tag. Again, it's not a dependent of the play, it's a dependent of the key press that follows after the play. But we're going to go right back up to menu Q1. We'll call this go-to Q1 invalid. And we'll go right back to menu Q1, which, as we know, goes right to play Q1, which says, do you like it? So what'll happen is if I press a wrong key, I'll hear, that is an invalid entry. It'll loop right back up and it'll say, do you like us? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no, and ask me for my response again. And that's how we handle an invalid. Okay? Now, let's do a follow-up question. The follow-up question is a different kind of question here. And technically, this should be a follow-up only to key press Q1, okay, to the yes answer. For ease, I'm just going to make it a dependent or an independent module itself. But normally, it would only go to the 1, and you'll see why. So we're going to call this menu Q2, question 2. Max digits 1, 3500, that's fine. And we'll do our play tag. Play question 2, text to speech, Roger. And remember, our first question was, do you like us? So our follow-up is, how much? Now we're going to do a different kind of answer. We're going to say, please enter a range. Interesting. From 1 to 9, with 1 being a lot and 9 being not at all. Okay, please enter a range with from 1 to 9, with 1 being a lot and 9 being not at all. Now we have a challenge in our key press here. So this is Q2R, Q2R, and we don't know what the number is here. It can be 1 through 9, okay? So default might work, but default would also pick up 0 and star, which we don't want. CallFire actually allows you to define a range. So we can enter the first digit inclusive of the range, which is 1, no space, put a hyphen in, and then enter the last digit inclusive of the range. So that'll be 9. And that gives us our range that we're looking for. We can say OK. And now, when we go to stash this, we're not going to do a set var this time, just a stash. Remember, we're using friendly variable names for the stashes, so how much is our friendly variable name? Now the value is, well, some number between 1 and 9. We don't know, but the system knows. And the way to do a system variable reference is exactly the same as the regular variable reference that we create. $, curly brace, variable name, close curly brace. But the variable name is predefined, and all system variable names start with the word call in lowercase, dot. So call dot, and then the variable name last input. So this knows to go out and get whatever the last key presses were according to the max digits. Remember how big max digits is. So if we had a max digit of 5, like remember our 5-digit account number we did before, and we did max digits actually of 6 to include the pound sign, last input would know to ignore the pound sign and to get the 5 digits beforehand. In this case, it knows to just get 1 through 9, and that's the only thing it's allowed to get. Okay? So that takes care of it. And then we could do an invalid handler to capture any bad entries. Okay? So that takes care of our survey, really. Now, remember we had 2 other key presses that we hadn't fully defined yet, and that was 3 to leave a message or 4 to speak with an agent. So let's say we want to leave a message. We want to flesh out this key press TLR3. Well, the first thing we need to do is tell them how to leave a message. So we would take a play tag and make it a dependent of key press TLR3. call it play, TLR3. Use our text-to-speech, Roger, and we would just say something like, please leave your message after the beep or tone, comma, pause, and press pound or hash when finished. And that's it. Then we put a record tag in place, define its attributes. So give it a name, record TLR3. Notice that it asks for a variable name. Its variable name is exactly like the variable names in a stash. It's really mainly a heading in the report. So again, we can use a friendly variable name like customer message. We can abbreviate customer. Okay? We're not going to record the rest of the call because we've already said to press pound when finished. Record the rest of the call usually goes at the beginning of any IVR, and that's to record the entire IVR. So that takes care of the record tag. Then we can just hang up on them because we're done. As soon as they press pound, they're finished, we hang up. Now, the transfer tag, we also want to do a play tag first to tell them what's going on. Make sure they don't hang up. So we're going to do play TLR4 and something like, please wait while we transfer you, or please wait, an agent will be with you shortly. Any of those will work. Okay, so we put in the play tag telling them, please hang on, don't hang up. Then we do the transfer tag. Now, suppose we just hired Jim to answer the phones. We can do transfer TLR4. We can put in Jim's number, 213-555-1212. And if that's all we have, that's all we have to do. We don't have to enable advanced features. We can come down here and click OK, and we're done. But suppose we hired two people. We hired Jim and we hired Judy. Well, we put in both numbers separated by commas. You can put in as many numbers as you want. There are some practical limits. Probably 10 or more is getting above what you want to do. I don't think it'll take any characters. We haven't really tested this. It won't take any characters above 256. Okay? So anyway, if we have more than one number, we must enable advanced features and say, here's how to handle it. And the two ways to handle it, the transfer styles, are ring all and waterfall. So in this scenario, if we're ringing both of their numbers because we hired both of them to answer the phone, that's ring all. We ring both of their numbers, and whoever answers first gets the call, gets more money. Okay? We can pass on the caller ID. This is a system variable reference. So remember, our system variable, $, piano bracket, or curly brace, call dot, then the name of the variable. Well, this gets important here. So if this were an inbound IVR, caller ID, indeed, would be our variable name. But actually, remember, we did outbound. So caller ID is us. We're the initial call. So the number we dialed is phone number. So phone number would pass our customer's number on to our agent. Okay? We can pick hold music. We recommend do not pick silence. People will hang up usually when they pick silence. Default is a sort of a smooth jazz that you hear at CallFire all the time. Ringing is a ringing sound, or any of these other options. We can pick classical here, for example. Okay? And then timeout, we're not going to worry about quite yet. So this would take care of it. Now, suppose we didn't hire Jim and Judy both to answer the phone. We hired Jim to answer the phone and told Judy that you're our accountant. You only have to answer the phone if Jim gets truly busy. Okay? In that case, we might want to do a waterfall instead of a ring all. And in a waterfall, we can say, okay, let's ring Jim's number for 30 seconds, which is about 6 rings. One ring cycle is about 5 to 6 rings. And so 30 seconds is 5 to 6 rings. And we can ring that first. And if he doesn't pick up, then we start ringing Judy's number. Okay? We can also do a whisper text-to-speech. The whisper is a little sound file that plays for your agent when they pick up the phone before the transfer is connected. So let's suppose you have a couple of businesses, a real estate business and a mortgage business. You can say something like, "This is my real estate business." And that's what they'll hear when they pick up the phone, and they'll know how to answer the phone. Okay? So that's it. We would say okay. And this takes care of our transfer tag. So what have we learned? We've looked at a CallFire simple IVR survey. And in the survey, we asked a meta-level question, will you take our survey? We went into the survey when they pressed yes, and we asked, do you like us? We got back an answer, yes or no. Both stored it in variables and stashed it in the report. We asked a follow-up question, how much? And asked a range question. We captured what that range question was in the report. We also looked at how to create a record tag, which is in itself basically a simple voicemail. Please leave your message after the beep, press pound and finish. We record their message. We hang up. The recording is available in the report. We also finally did a transfer tag, looked at how to do a transfer to one or more other numbers and take care of our call that way. This concludes the IVR webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us.